So I mentioned before Maariv here in Fairways, and I'm going to talk about it extensively after this year. We're going to have for the Shabbos table segment, where we're going to talk extensively about tomorrow, the special mitzvahs of tomorrow. But I will say that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that the pasuk Lifnei Hashem Titoru, before Hashem you should purify yourself, which literally means that on Yom Kippur, when you're before Hashem, we should work to purify ourselves. That's the Pashib Shab. That's not the way the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch learns. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch learns Lifnei Hashem, before you approach Hashem, Titaru. And therefore he says it's a special mitzvah to purify ourselves on Erev Yom Kippur, which of course everybody does. Everybody goes to the mikveh to purify as best as possible. Of course, the mikveh doesn't purify us because we're still all Tmei Mason, because we can't have the Meichatas, the ashes of the Paraduma sprinkled on us on the third and the seventh day. But as pure as we can be, we do the attempt, but we know that the Torah is compared both to water and to fire. Right? Torah is Eimayim el Torah. It says there's no water except for Torah, as the pasuk says, "Hoi kol tzamei l'chu l'mayim." Those that thirst for knowledge should go to the water, just like water comes down from the sky. The Torah came from the sky, just like water causes growth. Torah causes growth, just like water quenches the thirst of the body. Torah quenches the thirst of the soul. Just like water flows from high to low, Torah is found by the humble. And of course, Torah is compared to fire. Right? Behold, your words are like fire. So both in the purification process, both water and fire is used. Of course, a lot of things we do hagala. If a spoon gets, a spoon falls into a milchik cooked dish, so we boil up a pot of water and we put the spoon in the pot of water. If it's something like a spit that's used over fire, so then we do libun. We have to burn it with fire. So we purify ourselves before Yom Kippur, Lifnei Hashem Titaru, with Torah. So this is mamish, the best thing possibly you could be doing, we could be doing at this time on these very important 24 hours. Having said that, I want to apologize. The last few days, I've been keeping you waiting. I haven't been tuning in at 8. I am under the weather, and I was trying to, my wife was out, and I was trying to warm up a little soup so I shouldn't be coughing throughout this year. So, but with the help of Hashem, we should all have a gezunta year together. We are sponsored by Shalom Fogel, Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas Gad, Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zev, by Baruch Ian, who we learn Nishmas Yaakov Chai ben Abbas, the Bas Gittel, Avram ben Shmuel HaKohen, Yaakov Umansky, with a curse of Tov to the Rav and the Zoom family, and Nachas from children and grandchildren. Yaakov, I trust Yaakov Leibish Ben Sarah, I trust you're doing better. Yeah, you still look like you had the wind knocked out of your sails a little bit.
I can't say that I have my old energy back, but I'm definitely doing much better day to day.
Yeah, okay. Make sure to drink a lot before the time.
Urban.
Like tank up. And whatever Marshall says, make sure to do the exact opposite. If he asks you, tells you, that's it. That's good. That's good. And
vodka.
We are sponsored by AB Spry for Nachas for children and grandchildren at Sala, a virtual Talmud, from London, Joshua Rosenberg, a virtual Talmud. We remind you that we're learning now to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Dibarta Bam, Lasois Nachas Ruach Liyotzreinu, and we are holding on Daf Kuv Vav Amud Beis, and we're holding by Amalei Rapapa Labaya, which is 6 lines from the bottom. We welcome in Mo Kushner, and Baruch Hashem, Mo Kushner is not in a boat, and he's not. He's on terra firma. Mark Frankel, Berish Gesserman, what's his name? Marshall Castle, Shalom Fogel, Irving Fishbaum, Aaron Swade, Reuven Pollack, Saba, Shimon Klein. Shimon, this should be a much better year for you. Much better year. Dr. Block, Michal, Shelley Zeitman, Menachem Umansky, Yitzi Fuchs, Nachman Chapler, Rabbi Kranz. Also, it should be a much better year for you. And Shragi, Naftali Jablin, Yitzi Muller, Avram Rezepkowitz, Ilya Shutman, Abe Arbach, David Helfgott on Kol HaLashon. Over here, we have the pleasure of having Chaim Kramer and Michael Avram and Reuven Shannon. Okay, so the Gemara tells us, Amalei Rapapa Labaya, L'Shmuel the Amar Mikamtzen. Shmuel says that if, let's say, Reuven and Shimon divided the Yerusha because they thought that their brother Levi had died during COVID in Eretz Yisrael, and then he shows up. They made a mistake. He was in a isolation unit. They didn't know he survived. So Shmuel says that each one takes from his portion and gives a third to Levi. But they don't have to redivide again the whole thing. So the Gemara says, Lememra, does that mean that Shmuel is of the opinion, Dekam Dina, that we keep the arrangement and we don't reverse it? I, the Rav Shmuel Dimrei Tovai, Kur b'shloishim ani meichelach. If I say to Shalom, I'm selling you a kur for 30 sela, Yachal Azabai, we could retract afilu b'sa'ach reina. Either I or Shalom could retract even until the last saw is done. But kur b'shloishim saba selani meichelach, if I tell him I'm selling you a kur for 30 saw, a saw per sela, then rishon kain. Then once he takes possession of one saw, since I made a separate deal, a saw for a sela, as soon as he takes possession of a saw, I can't get it back. The second saw, can't get it back. But if I say 30 saw for sela, and he takes 29, until he takes the 30th one, it could be reversed. So the Gemara over here is wondering that even though I gave 29 to Shalom, if I didn't give the 30th yet, we could reverse it. So we see that you could reverse what was already done. So over here also, we should say that you reverse what's already done. Says the Gemara, no, it's not the same thing at all. In a business deal, it's the benefit of Shalom and myself that we should be able to back out until the deal goes through. Hasam Abed Rabbanan Milsa Denechalei L'Meicher V'Nechalei L'Lekeach. It's pleasing for Shalom and pleasing for me that the deal shouldn't be binding unless all the goods are delivered. Here, however, the two brothers that divided already, they want to keep their division. Itmar, Achim Shecholku, brothers that divided. Here, Reuven and Shimon divided an estate. And then their father was Yaakov. Yaakov owed money to Marshall, Nebuch. Yaakov owed money to Marshall. And here Marshall comes, which you know he will, because when it comes to collecting what's owed to him, he never fails, right? How do you think he gets all these Romanian sausages by the thousands, right? So Marshall came and collected the $10,000 from Reuven. There was a lien on the estate. He didn't bother. Marshall doesn't bother doing things in halves. He didn't take 5,000 from Reuven and 5,000 from Shimon. He took the whole 10,000 from Reuven. So what's the din then? So Achin Shecholku, if Reuven and Shimon divided, and Marshall came and took the 10,000 from Reuven. Rav Amar Batla Machlokes. Rav says that the division between Reuven and Shimon now is canceled, and they have to redivide again what's left, because both Reuven and Shimon were responsible to pay equally from the debt of the estate, and therefore they have to now put it back in one pool and redivide it again. Shmuel says, no. To Shimon's delight, Shmuel says, Viter. Reuven is out the money. He can't even ask Shimon to give him half of what was taken away. No, it was taken from Shmuel, and it was taken from Reuven, and Reuven loses out. Rav Asi says, well, what happens is that really we're mesupik whether Shimon should have to share in what was given to Marshall or not. So therefore, since we're not sure, if we were sure, he would have to give half. Since we're not sure, we make Shimon give a quarter. So Rav Asi Amar Noitel Ravia Bekarka, Shimon compensates Reuven for a quarter either from real estate or a Ravia B'mois, or with money. Now, so the shaila is, and Yitzi Fuchs tells us that he's tuned in on Kol HaLashon. So Yitzi, welcome. The shaila is, what's going on over here? So here's the deal. We're not sure if whether we say, when Reuven and Shimon divide it, we say Yesh Breira, that each one got retroactively what was their Yerusha. Or do we say that they each was supposed to take a half of every item? When they didn't do that, it's considered like they bartered. And therefore they're not Yoshim anymore, they're Lekuches, they're buyers. And they're buyers without achrayis, without a security clause. And therefore, if Marshall takes it from Reuven, he has no security clause to get compensated from Shimon. Let's see this inside. Rav Amar Batla Machlokes. Rav says, well, the whole division is now canceled because both Reuven and Shimon were responsible equally to give Marshall his $10,000. Kasavar ha'achin shecholku, brothers that divided, Yoshinaim, they're heirs. And as heirs, each one is equally responsible to give to Marshall his money. Now, Reuven gave it all, so they redivide the Yerusha once again. V'Shmuel Amavita. Shmuel says no. Reuven is up the creek without a paddle. He has no recourse to get half from Shimon. Why? Because Savar Achin Shecholku, the brothers that divided, they're not anymore Yorshim. They're not anymore equal holders of the estate. Because they didn't divide half of the dining table. They didn't divide half of the couch. They swapped. As swappers, that's barter. So they're buyers. If they're buyers, l'kuchas hava, but they're not just buyers, they're like they're like buyers without getting security. So therefore, when it was taken away from Reuven, he has no claim of compensation from Shimon. And therefore, Vita, Reuven loses out. Now, Rav Asi that says a quarter, he's mesupik. Rav Asi misafkele iyoshin hava, if they did have a din of yoshim, ilakuchas hava, or they have a din of a buyer. So since he's mesupik, hilkach noitel ravia bekarka or ravia b'mais. Therefore, we say that if they would be yoshim, Shimon would have to give half 5,000. Now we're not sure if Yoshim or Lekuchas without Achrayis, so it's either half or nothing, so he has to give a quarter. So he has to compensate Reuven either a quarter in real estate or a quarter of money. Amar Papa, what's the halacha? Amar Papa Hilchasa b'chol hani shmeitza. The law is in all of these sugyas that mekamtzin. So in a case where the two brothers divided the Yerusha, and then a third brother showed up alive, they each take a piece and give it to the third one. And over here also, we say that Mekamtzin, that Reuven gives from his Yerusha half to Shimon to compensate for the fact. I mean, Shimon gives half of the 10,000 to Reuven to compensate that Reuven paid Marshall the full $10,000. Ameima butla machlokes. Ameima says that the division is abolished. So if the third brother shows up, they have to abolish the division and redivide it into three. And and over here also, in our case, we would say that Reuven and Shimon have to redivide the estate and divide it again because they're equally responsible to pay for Marshall's debt. And that's the halacha. Now, the next case is a very interesting case. Very interesting case. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Excuse me. Tan Rabbanan. Shloishim sheyardu l'shum. Here they wanted to sell property of the orphans, and they went to a Bezdin to assess the value of the property of the Yoshim. And they each came, as it happens many times with Jews, they each came up with a different value. So the three judges are very, very prestigious judges. Aaron Swade, Dr. Guy, and Mark Frankel, very prestigious judges. Echad Omer b'mana. Aaron says that the land was worth 100 zuz. Ushnayim Omer b'masayim. And Aaron and Dr. Guy say it's worth 200. Or, Echad Omer b'masayim, Aaron says it's 200. Ushnayim Omer b'mana, and Mark and Dr. Guy say 100. So we go, bus in the majority. Batul Yochid b'miyutai. The opinion of Aaron, who is the minority, is negated. But what happens if they all have a different opinion? This gets very interesting. Echad Amar b'mana. Aaron says it's worth 100. The Echad Amar b'esrim. Dr. Guy says it's worth 20 selah. Now 20 selah is 80 zuz. This is for dinner in a selah, so it's 80 zuz. The Echad Amar b'shleishim. And Mark says it's 30. That's 120. So now we have three opinions over here. Aaron says 100, Dr. Guy says 80, and Mark says 120. So the Gemara says, the Tanakhama says, Nidain b'mana. We view the value as 100. Why? Because both Mark and Aaron agree that it's 100. Rabbi Eliezer Reb Tzaddik Nidain B'Tishim. Rabbi Eliezer Reb Tzaddik says we go in between Dr. Guy who said 80 and Aaron that said 100, and we make it 90. Now Mark says, what am I, chopped liver? I said 120. Why don't you also consider me, little old me? We'll see. This is really interesting. The Acherim say, first we calculate what's the difference between the least and the most. The difference between 80 and 120 is 40. We then divide that difference by 3. 3 into 40 is 33 and a third. No, 3 into 40 is
13 and a third.
3 into 40 is 13 and a third. Correct. So 3 into 40 is 13 and a third. So we add that 13 and a third to the 80, and we will assess the field at 93 and a third. Let's see that inside. Acherim Aimrim Oisin Shuma Beineim. We look at the difference between the lowest and the highest. So Dr. Guy was 80, Mark was 120. The difference is 40. Mishalshin, we divide it into 3. So 3 into 40 is 13 and a third. We add that to 80, and we'll say that the price is 93 and a third. So the Gemara is going to explain all of these reasonings. Don't worry, not all is not lost. As we welcome in Rabbi Avi Davidowitz and Eitan, and also Richard Rosenzweig joining on us on this all important evening. I'm bothering you a lot. I need to drink these days. Make sure that you don't switch the cups. You don't want to drink from my cup. Yeah, you don't want to drink from my cup right now. My cup is not runneth over right now. My cup has germs right now. I mean, I hope it's runneth over also, but tonight maybe I could use some bourbon.
I got a couple bottles. You're welcome to come over.
You know, when a Rebbe says he could use something, you don't say come over. You get in the car and you come over. Yeah. And then we have a beautiful davening, and we have a seat for you and your wife.
Then no one's going to run my davening here. I'm in trouble.
I hear.
You want some schnapps?
What?
After the shir, you want some schnapps?
No, I was just kidding. Just kidding.
Take it now. It'll be a great cheer. The rest of it will just blow by.
That's sink water?
This is your cups, right? I did not switch them about.
That's sink water? No.
There's no water in there.
Is there seltzer?
There is salsa.
Is there apple juice?
There is apple juice.
Okay, I'll have apple juice.
There's no water, but there is apple juice, cold apple juice.
Take it hot.
That sounds a good idea. Apple cider, that's a good idea. So now let's see. So we had three opinions over here. The first opinion, let's get the case again. Aaron said the field was worth 100. The guy said 80. Mark said 120. So the first opinion is that we, thank you. The first opinion is that we say 100. Well, that's very nice. The first opinion is that we say it's 100. So let's explain that. Manda Amanida Mamana, the one that says 100, it's simple. It's the compromise. The guy was too little at 80, Mark is too much at 120, Aaron is in the middle of 100, Aaron is the peacemaker, the great compromiser. The Welt says a great word. If you look in Masechtas Menachos, there's two opinions about a mezuzah. Either it's vertical or it's horizontal. There is no opinion that it's diagonal. So the Poskim say, and not everybody agrees with it, but the Minig Ashkenaz is to do it on a diagonal because at the portal of every Jewish home should be compromise. So Aaron is the great compromiser. So the Gemara says, "Manda Manida Mamana, Milsa Mitziasa." That's the middle one. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik Armenidan petition. Listen to his logic. Kasavar, he says, between Aaron and Dr. Guy, the land really ha'ara Kasavar ha'ara. This land really is Tishin Shava. It's really worth 90. V'aydekama esim, and Dr. Guy who said 80, 20 seller is 80, the Katoya Saralachure, he made a mistake and undercharged 10, undervalued 10. V'aydekama Mana, and Aaron who said 100, Katoya Saralachure, he overvalued it 100. So the Gemara says, again, Mark is saying, Was bin ich, chopped liver? Mark, you must really be feeling like chopped liver. Mark said, I said 120, so say the other way around. Say that the land is really worth 110. And Aaron that said 100, undervalued at 10. And Mark that said 120, overvalued at 10. So why do you say 90? Let's see it inside. Adarabba. Hayara meya v'asar shavya. Why don't you say the land is worth 110? And Aaron who said 100, katoy asar lachay. Lachure, he undervalued at 10. And Mark who said 30, which is 30 times 4, is 120, katoy asar lakamei. So the Gemara says, look, we're going to take it, the number, that if we say 90, Mark agrees that it's worth 90. He holds it's worth 120, but he agrees at least that it's worth 90. If we're going to say 110, two of them don't hold it's 110. I mean, Dr. Guy holds it's 80. And Aaron holds it's 100. So therefore, we'll go with the lower number and not the higher number. Nekait mia trei kamoi biyadcha. We take the two smaller amounts, the 80 of Dr. Guy and the 100 of Aaron Swade. The Mitiris Mana Leimapikle, it doesn't take it out of 100. And therefore everybody agrees with that, because even Mark agrees it's at least 100. Now we have the interesting pshat, and that's the pshat that we take the difference between the lowest and the highest, between 40 and 120, 80 and 120, so the difference is 40. We divide 40 by 3 to 13 and a third. We add that to the lowest one, Dr. Guy's, and we make it 93 and a third. Let's see that inside. The others say, Oisin Shuma Beinayim. We first assess the difference between the lowest and the highest, which is 40. Or Mishalshin, and we divide it by 3. So what we'd say is, Kosavre, we assume, Hi Ara, this land is really Tisha Utlasa Vitilsa Shabka, is really 93 and a third. And when Dr. Block said 80, Hi Dekama Esrim, remember Esrim 20 times 4 is 80, Katoi Tleisa Vitilsa Lachure, he undervalued it 13 and a third. The problem is if Aaron, if really the cost of the land is 93 and a third, then Aaron, if he overvalued it 13 and a third, it should be more than 100. It's 93 and a third plus 13 and a third is 106 and 2/3. See, Gemara says you're right. He overvalued it 13 and a third more. But if he overvalued it 13 and a third more, he shouldn't say 100. He should say 106 and a third, right? 2/3. But he didn't say more because he didn't want to be so far from Dr. Guy's assessment. I don't want to. It's enough that I said so much more than Dr. Guy at 100. I should say 106 and 2/3. That's too much. So the Gemara says again, why do you start with Dr. Guy and Aaron? Again, Mark is feeling mamish like the Phillies tonight. I mean, it's really. Says the Gemara. Adarabba. Why don't we say that the land is really worth 113 and a third? Adarabba, ha'ara meya utleisa utlasa shavia. The land should be 113 and a third. Aaron, who said 100, haidekam amamana katay tleisa utlasa lachure. He undervalued it 13 and a third. V'haidekam shloishim. The mark that said 120, 120, 30 is 30 times 4 is 120. Toy tleisa v'tilsa l'kamei. He made a mistake 13 and a third ahead. Now, if the real value of the land is 113 and a third, and he made it more 13 and a third, he should have made it 126 and 2/3. Ubdinu dekama tvei. He should have made it 126 and 2/3. But savar mistoy dekama matfina kulei hayachavroi. I don't want to go so far away from Aaron that said 100, so he says 120. So the question is, so why do we say that we settle at 93 and a third? We should settle at 113 and a third. Says the Gemara, the same answer. We'll go with 93 and a third. The Mitaris Meya loy mapkele. It doesn't go over 100. It doesn't go over 100. So therefore, two of them agree that it's at least 93 and a third. But if you make it 113 and a third, then only a Mark would be in that ballpark. So we don't do that. Amar Rav Huna, surprise, surprise, halacha ka'acherim. The law is like the acherim, that when one says 100, one says 80, and one says 120, we make it 93 and a third. of Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi says, Taima da'acherim lo yadinan. I don't know what the logic is. What's the logic that we take the difference between the lowest and the highest and divide it by 3 and then add it to the lowest one? He says, we don't know the logic. Hilchas avdinan kavasayu. We should do. I mean, I'm looking at Michal Avram, and Michal Avram just says, I don't know why you don't take the average of the 3. Oh, that would make sense. How do you do averages? You add up all 3, and then you divide them by 3. Right? That's a regular average, right? The Gemara doesn't do that. And we learned also, Tana Daine Goyla, the Daine Goyla say, Oisa Shumim Beineim, we calculate, they hold like the Acherim, we calculate the difference between the highest 120 and the lowest 80, and then divide the 40 by 3, or Mishalshin, and add it to the lowest one. Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna says, Hilchas HaKadaina Gaila, the law is like the Daina Gaila, and Amar Rav Ashi, I don't understand. Time of the Daina Gaila, I don't know the reason of the Daina Gaila. Hilchas Avdin and Kavasai, we should do like them. Now, if let's say Marshall, even on Erev Yom Kippur, nothing stops him. Nothing. Erev Yom Kippur. And what can you do? What can you do? Mark is a loser in Philly, right? So he keeps on dealing with Marshall. Marshall tells Mark, I'm selling you half this field. Now there's a better part of the field and a weaker part of the field. Marshall doesn't have to give Mark the better part of the field. He has to give Mark half of the value of the field. In other words, if the field is worth $100,000, Marshall has to give Mark $50,000 worth of the field. But he could save for himself the best part of the field. That's going to mean that Mark might get 60% of the field. But you see, Mark, he's hopping mad. He's jumping up and down. His wife is going to come running down. What's going on? Right? Because Mark says, I want to divide the creamiest parts of the field. You get and I get. Mark is a fair guy. Right? Marshall could say nothing doing. I said I'm selling you half the field. All I have to sell you is half the value of the field. But I could keep Boardwalk and Park Place. If he keeps Boardwalk and Park Place, he doesn't get the full half. He's not going to get 50%. He might end up getting 35%. But Mark can't say, Marshall, you sold me half the land, give me half of the cream. He can't say that. Now, that's not a Kiddush. That would happen probably even if Mark was dealing with Rabbi Kratz. But get a load of how low Marshall is. Marshall tells Mark, I'm selling you the south of the field. Now the south of the field is the best part of the field. There also Marshall doesn't have to give him the south of the field. He only has to give him half the value of the field. Mark is hopping up and down. The veins are protruding. He says, you told me the south of the field. Marshall says, I meant the value of the south of the field. I only have to give you the value. Let's see it inside. By the way, this is a very big Kiddush.
It's amazing that he still calls him his friend. He says to his friend, I'm selling you half the field. Mishamnin beinehem, and the Gemara says Mishamnin beinehem means that the difference between them is that Marshall keeps the shuman, Marshall keeps the cream, he keeps the boardwalk. The noitel chatzi sadeu, and he only has to give Mark half the value of the field. Even if he says chetzia b'darim ani meichelach, I'm selling you half in the south. Still mishamnim beineim. Still Marshall could keep the cream. He doesn't have to give him the south. V'noitel chetzia b'darim, and Mark takes the value of half in the south. But he takes the value of half in the south in any place in the field. Now, when Mark gets half the field, who has to make room for the fence that's going to separate the field? Believe it or not, it's the buyer that needs to put up the fence. Not just the fence, because he has to make sure. Mark, he's an interesting guy, Mark. Sometimes he has in his courtyard coyotes. He thinks they're cute, right? And he has this big, wild dog. Now, he has to make sure that the coyote and the dog doesn't jump over the fence. And to do that, he's responsible to put up a series of 2 trenches. A big one, and after the big one, immediately near the wall, a small one. Why? Because if he just makes one hole, the animal will go into the hole and jump from the hole. So therefore, he has to make one hole and then another little hole next to it, so that if the animal goes in the hole and jumps in the hole, he'll fall in the little hole, and from there he won't be able to jump. So let's see this inside. The of Mark accepts it's from his half that has to be put up the fence. Charetz, a trench, uben charetz, and a smaller trench. The kamu charetz, how wide does the trench have to be? Shisha tvachim. Ben charetz, and the smaller trench has to be shloisha tvachim, 3 tvachim. You really have to make sure. If a guy raises coyotes, he has to make sure not to damage people. Now, Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan, Loikeach noitel koches shabai. You see, I gave you the scoop. I told you. Mark gets. I don't want to say the word that's usually used because Reb Ruvain holds that it's not a nice word. To use the word S-C-R-E-W, Reb Ruvain in Yeshiva never let us use that word because it's used for vulgar purposes. So he held that you weren't allowed to say it. So we'll say it in Mama Lashon. Mark got messed over. Right? He got messed over. He only gets the inferior half. So the Gemara says, I don't understand, that doesn't sound like what the Mishnah is saying. It says, which sounds like that the cream is between them. That Mark should get some cream and Marshall should get some cream. Amalei, so he said to him, while you were eating hot dogs in Bavel, that's not what it means, but while you were eating fat dates in Bavel and distracted, Targimna Miseifa, we brought a proof from the Seifa, the Ktani Seifa, Chetzia b'darim ani meichelach, I give you a half in the darim, Mishamne menayim, v'noitel chetzia b'darim. So what does that mean? Lamai. If he gets half in the south, What do you mean that the shuman is between them? It means that when Marshall says half in the south, he only meant the value of half in the south. But he could give him any part of the field. He doesn't have to give him the cream. When he says that Mark gets half the field, he gets the value of half the field, but he doesn't get the cream. And Mark is royally messed. Now, Rabbi say, the Mishnah I did already, because now I'm going to do the series for the Shabbos table, which I'm going to be giving on what we should do tomorrow, which is, I think, a very appropriate subject for tonight.